Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Study Chronicles. Today I'm going to be going over the hijack versus the big blind. Last episode we went over the button from the button versus big blind from the big blind's perspective, and so today we're going to be covering an earlier position raise in a similar fashion as the button versus big blind. So the button versus the big blind is a much wider range, hijack being a lot tighter. So you're going to see some significant differences in all of the ranges, as well as some of the post-flop tendencies. So I've created a drill already. We're going to look at the ranges pre-flop as we always do, and then we're going to move into drilling some hands. So let me pull up GTO Wizard now, and we will start going over the scenario. So from the hijack, I'm always using the NL 500 general GTO ranges on Wizard, and we're going to be raising for a min raise. Now this is obviously different than raising 2.5x on the button. We're giving the big blind a better price. We're giving the small blind a better price, even giving the button a better price to call. So we're going to face a decent amount of continues from these later positions and the blinds. So that being said, we have a different range than if we were to use 2.5x or 3x, but min raise is typically the one I like to use because in game theory, you don't really want to be using a larger sizing, as it's likely that the players behind are going to have more of a 3-bet frequency when you're opening in earlier positions. So you see a lot of smaller raises from earlier position, like under the gun and hijack, because of that. So that's what we're going to use, and this is what our range is going to look like. We have all of the pairs all the way down to twos, but twos is going to mix at a frequency. So I think on the button, we have pure every pair, and then cutoff, we start to mix, I think, some pocket twos and threes, but fours are going to be pure. And then so going back to the hijack, fives is the cutoff for pure raising any pair. And so that's where we're going to have the pure strategy all the way down to ace 10 offsuit, over to king 6 suited, ace 2 suited, all of the 9x suiteds, and then some of the better suited connectors like 10-8 and 9-8. And that's it. There's not going to be too many pure combos to be opening from earlier position. It's fairly easy to remember this kind of range. It is very tight. It is linear, and it favors high card combos here. You're not going to see too much of 5-4 suited open or 6-5 suited open from earlier positions. It's taking more priority in the suited nines, hands like this. It's not until you get into the button where you start seeing these suited connectors open up a lot. So yeah, that's going to be the range for the hijack. And the defense from the big blind really quickly. Little tighter than I think versus the button, but still the same ideas, right? We're going to have a lot of 3-bets with suited connectors. As you can see here, they play very well against early position opens and post flop. But then you see a lot tighter of a calling range when it comes to these big pairs. So as we saw, button versus big blind, we had a lot of 3-bets from like jacks and tens. Now we're actually going to close to pure call these combos, and we're becoming a lot more polar versus these early position raises. You can see a lot of the suited aces and suited kings are taking priority for 3-betting instead of something like jack 7 suited or 10-8 suited or jack 8 suited, all of these combos over here that were in the big blind versus button scenario. So versus the earlier position, we have this polarized range. We're also even using some offsuit aces because they have good removal effects in terms of, early position having a very strong range, having a very ace high heavy opening range. So that's what our ranges are going to look like. So right away, you can kind of tell certain textures are going to be really good for the hijack that involve this section of hands here. Oops, didn't mean to go that far. This section of hands here. And then the combos that are going to interact with these boards here like the 9 high, the 8 high, the 7 high, we might see a higher frequency of leading out of the big blind than before, because the earlier positions aren't going to interact with those lower boards as well as something like the button. All right. I have already prepared a drill here, so we're just going to jump in and start drilling. Hijack versus big blind, single raised pots. And as we go through, I'm going to look through the different strategies just like we have in the past episodes. So we're going to have the perspective of the hijack today, single raised pot on the flop. All right. Good start as we immediately flop the nuts. Now, this is a very strong board for the hijack. As you saw earlier, big blind does lack queens plus. It mostly is going to flats, jacks, and lower. So it just about misses this texture. Ace, king, queen is like the perfect texture for hijack because we have aces, kings, queens, and all of the high suited broadways, which big blind doesn't. So what ends up happening is I think we're going to see a range bet here from hijack because it's just such a good board texture for us that we want to be betting with most of our range here. And most of our range does interact with this anyway. So I think I'm going to go either 33 or 50, and depending, maybe even large at a frequency. I think when we have hands like the nuts or something like Jack 9 of spades, those are going to be combos that want to go a lot larger, or 10 9 of spades, something like that. So let's bet 75 this time. I think 50 and 33 are going to be the safe bets because I do know that this is a range bet texture. And typically when you have a range bet, you want to use a smaller sizing to give a better price to all of your weaker hands in that range bet. So I think I'm going to bet 50 here, but I don't mind seeing a larger bet. Yeah, so I did go 50 here, and larger bet is good as well. But as you can see, there's no check frequency. Of course, we have the nuts here. You're not going to see much check. But if I were to look at this scenario, I do think this board is going to be a range bet. You often see a lot of people check these board textures, which is, I think, a mistake. Yeah, you have basically a range bet with a 0.07 or 0.7 check percentage. Okay, next hand, king 3-3, another board that's really good for us. I think we're going to have a high frequency c-bets. Speaking of which, we didn't look at the reports yet. So let's take a look at the reports of what our strategy is mainly going to look like once the big blind checks to us. So this could be on any texture here because the top part is our strategy. So right away, we see a 31% check frequency, which is a lot lower than what the button was. So if you remember, the button check frequency, I think, was something like 48 or 49%. Let me take a quick look at that again, and we can confirm that. But I'm fairly certain that it was close to 50% in terms of checking in position. Yeah, 46.7%. So from the button compared to the hijack, we see our c-bet frequency go up significantly. And on certain textures, we're going to see a lot of range betting. So there we go. So we're mostly going to be using the 33% sizing mixed with some 50 and 75. Overbetting is an option as well. We have all four options. Typically in single raise pots in position, we always have all four options. As the in position player, you get the option to keep the pot small or to start shoveling money in, whatever you want to do. So you're going to have multiple different morphologies in your ranges, meaning you're going to have some polarized ranges, you're going to have some more linear ranges, you're going to have some condensed ranges in terms of how you're going to play on certain flop textures. And the option for overbetting is typically going to polarize your range, and the smaller bet is going to keep your range uncapped, maybe more linear type of a range. So those are the four options. It looks like 33 is the most common. So when in doubt, maybe using the smaller sizing isn't going to be a bad idea. But yeah, being open to understanding when to use the medium and larger sizings. King 3-3 is a good texture for betting at a high frequency. Again, having this king here on the texture is going to really favor us. We have ace king, we have king queen suited, etc., etc. I mean, big blind does have king queen suited pure here too, but having ace king is a big deal. Having aces, having kings, etc. Now, big blind does have some 3x that we don't, but I think overall we're going to have a range advantage because we have more middle and high pairs. So I'm going to go for a fairly high frequency c bet here for the small sizing. On paired boards, typically you are going to have a lot of small sizings. And it looks like we actually have a very high frequency check here. This is surprising. I think this is going to be a very hand specific high frequency check. Because this hand plays really well checking back, protecting the range as the worst king that we're opening from the hijack. So this is the worst king we have, which means anytime you see a top pair come off, the big blind is going to have better top pairs than us. Even I think maybe ace king at a frequency, if we look back at our pre-flop ranges. Ace king does in fact have a call frequency from the hijack from the big blind versus the hijack. So on textures like king high, we have to be careful not to just range bet all of our top pairs, and we don't want to be triple barreling these because better hands are going to pay us off than this weak kicker. All right, so we do have that small bet, but we did see how much of a check it was. And then if we look at our overall betting frequency, I think this is going to be a high frequency c bet. So I think it's going to be like 70 or 80% c bet here. Looks like it is about 47% c bet. Oh wait, no, sorry. I was clicking on the wrong thing. Okay, this makes more sense. Yeah, 66% roughly c bet. This is what I would expect. And then you can see king 5, bottom part of our range, is actually the highest frequency check that we have. Yeah, perhaps king 5 of clubs is the highest frequency check that we have. Because of what I said, it plays so well as a check. It plays so well protecting our range when checking back some of the weaker parts of our range. And it also doesn't want to go 3 streets. So fits really nicely into a check back range. Next hand. Jack 9 on Jack 8. Again, this is a board texture. I think we can have a fairly high frequency c bet. The problem here, though, is that big blind is going to defend a lot of the middling cards without 3-betting. So hands like Jack 9 themselves, hands like Jack 10, hands like King Jack, Queen Jack, all of those combos offsuit are going to be defending and not 3-betting at a high frequency. And then the suited combos are also going to be defending versus early position at a fairly high frequency as well. They also have pocket 8s at a pure frequency. They're not going to be 3-betting that. Pocket 9s, pocket 10s at a very high frequency. So yeah, I think this one we can c bet, but we can't get away with a range bet. Although this does interact very well with all of our range. Again, we either have 2 overcards on this texture at a high frequency, or we have some kind of pair or draw. There aren't too many suited hands that don't connect with this other than something like ace 4 suited, king 6 suited. All of the queen highs are going to be interacting with this board. All of the king highs other than the king 5, king 6, king 7. I'm going to c-bet this one for a small sizing, and I would guess this is closer to like a 60% c-bet with our range. On the turn, interesting turn. Whenever there's an overcard that comes on the turn, it's going to change the configuration of both players' ranges, because now obviously some of our weaker hands like ace king and king queen made top pair. So typically you're not going to see a lot of overbetting when there's a card that's larger than the texture, because you can kind of merge more of that range on this turn. So if we did have something like ace king or king queen, we can go for a medium to large bet now. And then maybe polarize if we have a jack. But I think we're going to split range between 50, 75, and maybe 125 as well. I think 125 is going to be a very narrow range, but it could have an overbet here. I think I'm going to go with either bet 75 or bet 50. And for this example, I'm just going to go bet 75 when we roll a 25, which is an aggressive number. So we are going to mostly be betting 50, 75, and 30. 33 does surprise me. I haven't been doing this enough. I need to remember to do this actually. So let's take that down in our note. So playing out of the hijack, first of all, we see that C betting at 70% frequency in general. So that's a high frequency. Just making this note, remembering how we need to be more aggressive against the blinds when they defend, when we're in earlier position versus when we're in later position. So we're C betting at 70% frequency. Was it 70%? It was around 70%, right? It was like 60 something, I think, but around 70% frequency. Let's make it more precise here. So raise, call, check. Yeah, 68.6%. So basically 70%. But just to keep it precise here, we'll keep it at 68% frequency. What else? So from the hijack's perspective, we want to have all four sizings. Small, medium, large, overbet. And high frequency range betting on 3 Broadway boards. So in order to do Broadway, this is the money sign B. Range betting on and similar boards. Okay, so that's some of the notes that we made, some leaks. I'll put leak here. Not using small sizing enough on turn when overcard comes off. So having another range when a overcard comes off. Not having that small sizing in position is detrimental because there are combos here that do want a small size. Like I said before, something like King Queen, something like King 10, something like Pocket Queens, something like Pocket 10s maybe that needs some protection against floats, right? I do think it's a pretty interesting turn when the overcard comes off, but keeping that all in mind, right? Maybe I need to use that small sizing more frequently. All right, next hand, 9-8-3, we see, this is an interesting board because both players have the nuts at a close to pure frequency. We lack a little bit of pocket 3s actually, but we both have pocket 9s, pocket 8s, 9-8 suited. Neither of us are going to have 8-3 or 9-3 suited, so that's on fairly even grounds. However, we have an overpair advantage, and we have hands like Jack 10 suited, 10-9 suited at a higher frequency because villain is going to be 3-betting those. So I think that this is going to be favoring us. I think that we're going to have maybe all 4 options on this texture. We could split our range between having an overbet, having a small bet, and having a large bet. This hand particularly, I think, wants to go small or medium or large. I don't think we want to overbet, but it could be there. It could be in our range. Villain does have pocket 10s and pocket jacks at a fairly high frequency as we saw. So like overbetting a 9 doesn't feel as good. So I think if we were to split our overbet and our large bet range up, the overbet range would have something like pocket 10s plus. And then our large bet would mostly be consistent of a 9, and then some other like middling strength hands like ace 8 or something. So I'm going to bet 50 here. I think this sizing suits this combo and our strategy, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see all 4 options. Do we want to check 25% of the time? That's another thought I have. Could also check. I rolled a 75. That's going to be an option, I think. And as we saw, we're going to have roughly a 30% global check, meaning if I do roll something higher like this number, I don't mind seeing a check. So I'm going to check this time. It could be a mistake, though, because this hand does need some protection from like medium Broadway combos. let's just go with the safe choice, which I think is bet 50. So yeah, so bet 50 or bet 33. And like I said, we do have all 4 options available. Makes sense to me. I think King 9 is fairly strong to be included in the overbet, but seems okay. Maybe we wouldn't overbet something like 10-9. I don't know. But yeah, we have all the options here. Just out of curiosity, I'd like to see, more about this scenario, because it is interesting whenever you have all 4 options available. So yeah, it's pretty close to equal of all 4 options. It's just because this is such a dynamic flop in the sense of how our range interacts with it. We have some hands that absolutely smash this flop, and then we have some hands that are complete air on this flop, right? But mostly we're going to have this really strong in the middle range that wants to be aggressive. And you'll see a lot of our Broadway combos are the ones that are going to be aggressive. And then we have, our 9x that wants to be aggressive. And then our lower pocket pairs are going to be the more passive combos that check back at a higher frequency. Hands like King 5 that totally whiff this flop are going to be checking back. And we don't have that high of a frequency bet. This is a higher frequency check than global. And I think that's because of what I was mentioning, where the big blind does interact with this board as well. And we can see that reflected in the range versus range in terms of equity and in terms of best hands. This is actually surprising to me that it's such a discrepancy here. I would have guessed it wasn't that big. But big blind does have 3s, 9s, 8s, and 9/8 suited, like I was saying. I think it's just this overpair advantage is just such a big advantage. And because the good hands are going to be the jacks and the 10s, they aren't included in the best hands. Same thing with these 9x combos, right? So I think it's a little deceiving that the best hands has such a big advantage towards the hijack, because there's something interesting about looking through the range versus range comparison, is that whenever you can't just look at the mirrored combos and compare who has more, right? You have to look at the equity, because this is all done from equity, which is why they're called equity buckets. So if you have 75% and higher equity, then that's when the hand will go into the best hands category. So a hand like pocket 10s, even though is very strong on this texture, it's not going to go into the best hands category because it has less equity compared with a strong range from the hijack. So if you were to take like the button versus the big blind and you had pocket 10s in your range, then it might have a lot more equity and qualify for the best hands. But because it's against the tighter range, you'll see that it's not included in the best hands, even though it is a very strong hand. So yes, the big blind has a lot of strong hands, but I guess it's not going to qualify for the quote unquote best hands category. And that's maybe why we see a lot of overbetting as well with our big pairs, because those are going to have a ton of equity versus villains, middling type of range. All right. Hey, Shaq Prot, I'll do the mental game coaching after I'm done with this. I'll try and remind me if I forget. 862, hijack versus big blinds. I think we have all of the options here. It starts to get dangerously closer to the big blind the lower cards you get, though. So like a 9 high flop is going to be geared more towards the hijack, because the hijack has all of those 9x suited combos, but we're not going to have a lot of 8x suited combos. So yes, we do have more overpairs now. However, we're having less interaction with the top card. And I think maybe the range advantage evens out a little bit more on an 8 high board versus a 9 high board. That being said, I think we still have all the options. We have all of the overpairs. We have a lot of strong hands. We have some sets and all of that. So I think we're going to see a mix of bet and check here. Probably around a 40 to 50% C bet. And then check is going to be high frequency and we rolled high. This hand does really well c-betting, but I think we can mix check, so we're going to check this time. And again, yes, we have all of the options. So these are interesting textures to study because of all the options, learning how to split your ranges, learning how to use multiple sizings. These are the textures that are great to practice on. I'm actually going to take a note of that here. I'm going to make a quick marker so I can go back later and make maybe some content for that. Cool. All right. So once we check back on turn, do we float the turn with king high and 2 overs? We would rather have a 10, of course. We would rather have something like king 10 with a gut shot. This is very marginal to floats. I don't know, honestly, if this one is going to be a float. I think my default is just to fold when I just have 2 high cards here. Having a jack of spades is nice because if we do float and a spade comes off, we'll have a hand to bluff with. But I think we'd rather just do that with something like ace king or ace queen with a spade. So I think I'm going to fold in this spot. Yeah, we are going to fold, and we do see a little bit of raise in there. Perhaps for the reason I was mentioning, which having a jack of spades is nice. We have 2 overs if we do get called. So maybe we have some equity versus like 9x that bet calls. And then we have some, you know, maneuverability on a spade or a 10 or something like that where we can semi-bluff. Or bluff rather, not semi-bluff, but yeah. Ace 9-2 board, interesting texture. I think this is going to be a fairly high c-bet frequency overall, maybe something like 50 to 60% c-bet. However, we do have a lot of middling hands on this texture. We have a lot of middling pairs like queens, jacks, 10s, 9x. So I think we're going to have a healthy check back range on ace-high board like this. And if we were going to bet, we would bet small. I think I'm going to check this time, rolling a 70. Yeah, so we're having a high frequency check here. I'm actually curious about what the global c-bet on this, not global, but I guess the board texture c-bet would be on this board. Looks like we are in fact checking about 52% of the time. So higher frequency than I thought. I thought it was about, what did I say, 50 to 60? It's closer to 48, 40 to 48. So yeah, close to 50. I guess I wasn't that wrong, but still higher check frequency than global for sure. And this is because big blind's going to have a lot of suited aces for defending. They're going to have offsuit aces also. It's mostly because we have a lot of medium strength hands on this texture that want to check back and not bet 3 streets. Whenever you have a large card on the board, the largest card on the board, more specifically, you're going to have a lot more medium strength hands. You're going to have a lot of like air hands because we have king queen suited, we have all of those broadways, queen 10 suited, jack 10 suited that just miss this texture, right? So you're going to see a lot of checking on an ace high texture, and ace high textures are very unique in that regard, because even king high textures interact with a larger part of our range from opening an early position, right? So I think this is a pretty cool spot to also study if you want to look at more nuanced spots that have higher check back frequencies. Okay, let's continue. So we check back. Then on the turn, I think we're going to see a lot of large betting from big blind, perhaps over betting. But I don't think we can sneak any value in here. We want to get to the river. I don't want to get check raised. We can get check raised by a lot of drawing hands. So just going to check back again. And then on the river, even this is a thin value bet because we can only really get paid by pairs with a heart, maybe that bluff catch, or jack X that just got a river, or 9x. Like 9x might not even pay off versus a large bet. This is a thin value bet if we do bet. I think I'd rather have a heart blocking the check raises from the big blind. This is probably the bottom of our betting range if I had to guess, because villain can pay off with a jack. So I'm going to bet this time, but it wouldn't surprise me if this is just a pure check. Yeah, this is a pure check. It's just not quite there for value. We can have ace X that we checked all the way down to the river. If you look at our value range for betting the river, it's going to be hands that were protected on the flop by checking back, like ace 4, ace 5, ace 7, all of these like one pair hands you can see here. We're going to have all of these by the river, even as strong as ace queen by the river. So yeah, we don't have to look for thin value when it comes to kings or queens. But like I mentioned, if we had the heart, you can see it starts to bet. And this is because, again, we block the stronger hands of villain and we unblock more combos of weak, like jack X, like queen jack suited, that we can't be, of course, we're not blocking if we have the queen of hearts. So when we're unblocking the weaker calls from villain and we're blocking the stronger raises, it makes more sense to bet for value, right? So we do see some kings and queens in that value range, but I think, like I was mentioning, those are going to be kind of the bottom of our range for value. Maybe we have, let's see, under pairs, so kings and queens. Second pair, we have a little bit of jack X here with king jack. But most of our jacks are just going to be checking back, and all of our third pairs and lower are just going to be checking back. We're never betting for value with a 9 or pocket 10s. So it is, in fact, the cutoff point of having like king jack or pocket queens. And we get raised. That's exactly why we don't love betting without our queen of hearts. All right, 10-4-2. So this is the first monotone board we've seen. I think we're going to have mostly a small bets and maybe a little bit of a mix of 50% in there, but I think small bet's going to be the most common. I think monotone boards are somewhat of an equalizer in terms of range advantage, because big blind is going to have a lot of weak suited connectors that we're not going to have that make flushes. So typically you don't see a lot of polarization on a monotone board. Usually you see small bets or medium-sized bets. And if we want to take a look closer, we can kind of see more so about the range advantage. So you see here, there is a best hands advantage for the hijack because we have a tighter range. Anytime you have a tighter range with a lot of strong suited combos, you're going to see an advantage for a monotone board. That being said, villain still has a lot of ace high flushes. They still have a lot of king high flushes, and then they have more queen high and jack high flushes than we will, right? So that category of queen high and jack high flushes, is definitely going to be there. And even though the percentage of best hands is higher, because the range is tighter, the big blind is going to have more overall flushes, if that makes any sense. So it is important to just recognize that they're going to have a flush at a fairly high frequency on a monotone board. And then we're also going to have a lot more good hands in the hijack, a lot of overpairs that are going to, without a spade, that don't have, you know, a lot of equity, but good equity, that don't want to be betting 3 streets. So that's another big part of monotone boards, right? We have a big good hands category that doesn't want to bet 3 streets, so that we want to find some checks on the flop at a higher frequency. And so you see, this is maybe one of the higher frequency check boards that we're going to come across. So 35% check is, oh wait, sorry, I got that backwards. Hold on. Let me unfilter there. There we go. Check is 32%. That's actually a low. No, this is surprising. I would have guessed this was a higher check frequency. I didn't think we'd be betting as much as we are here. Okay, so I'm learning something today. Yeah, I am probably under c-betting on monotone boards from the hijack. I wonder why we have such a high frequency bet on a texture like this. This is closer to the global bet frequency, to be fair. So I don't think it's above average in terms of c-betting, but it is higher frequency than I would have guessed. because, like I said, we have a lot of good hands in our range, so it does make sense to check back a lot. Let's take a look closer. So what qualifies as a good hand and what are we doing with it? Okay, so a lot of our good hands are actually like one spade hands, which can do a lot of triple barreling because blocking an ace of spades or blocking a king of spades is really good for bluffing, right? So this is maybe a bit deceptive in that these good hands, right? These good hands would normally be like a trash hand or a weak hand on other textures. But because we have that presence of a flush draw, a lot of our good hands are just flush draws, not made hands that want to triple barrel. So interesting. That would make sense as to why we want to bet at a higher frequency, because these are like semi bluffs with a lot better equity than normal, basically. So they kind of skip up to a category of good, which typically good hands are going to have high equity that have good showdown value, but these hands don't really have great showdown value. So there's this interesting, there's like this interesting interaction with the monotone boards with our high card combos, which inflate the equity, but still don't increase the showdown value of the hand, where typically a medium hand strength is going to have more showdown value, less of a drawy hand. Okay. Interesting. So knowing all of that, a little bit of a side quest there. Knowing all of that, this hand is a good one to small bet at a high frequency. And of course, we get it wrong. I guess this is more of a true medium strength hand when we have a pair plus the queen of spades. So I would guess that if we had just the bare queen of spades, it would be a higher frequency C bet. Going back to that parallel I was just making about medium strength hands and showdown value and stuff. This one, so if we have like a bare queen of spades, like king queen, or if we have queen 10 with a queen of spades, maybe this is a higher frequency C bet. No, it looks like it's a pretty high frequency check here with queen 10. Okay, monotone boards are tricky. I'm going to say that right now. Interesting. I guess queen 10 is just bottom part of our range. Wants to do more checking, similar to the idea of like the king 5 suited on that king 3-3 board we looked at earlier. This is kind of maybe that hand that has good protection, has a strong amount of equity, plays well checking back. That being said, small bet's not wrong. 10-5-4-2 on turn. Gonna mix check and bets again. I think we're gonna usually go for as large as a 75% sizing, maybe some over bets with like the ace high flushes, but certainly not this combo. So I think with this combo, we're either gonna bet 33.50 or 75 at the largest. I think this hand wants to mostly check back after betting the flop. As we saw, it was a high frequency check on the flop. So typically when you see a high frequency check on the flop and after you bet, you're going to do a lot of checking on the turn. So we're going to check here. There we go. And then on the river, is this too wide for value? This might just sneak into a value bet. I think if they had ace 10 or king 10, they would be betting the river more often, either a small bet or large bet. So I think we can sneak in some value with this hand. Nope, check back. Okay. So that seems to be a leak of mine where I keep thinking I have some thin value. Going too thin for value on river with weaker hands after bet, call, check, check. And then check. All right. Yeah, interesting. Watch me get raised now. Okay. All right, let's go over one more hand. I think we've covered a lot already, from the hijack of understanding, the fundamentals of what our overall strategy looks like versus the big blind, of, sizing choice that we want to use, of, what kind of category of hand wants to check our bets. what kind of texture changes those equity buckets, right? A lot of interesting concepts so far. And I've learned a bit myself on monotone boards. I'll have to practice those more, as I think I'm probably leaking, not betting enough from earlier positions. 985. Going to, oh, what do we do here actually? So this is a board that I think will have a higher frequency check on. These middling connected boards are going to do well for the big blind. So I think our strategy is going to mostly be small bet, medium bet, and check. I rolled 18, so that's an aggressive number. Let's go with a medium-sized bet then. I'm not sure we have a small bet here, but I think maybe we polarize a bit more on these connected board textures to bet 50 and bet large. Let's see. Okay, high frequency check here. That's not too surprising. The EV is very similar though between all of these options here. You can see it's all 131. So I actually want to see what kind of strategy we have on a texture like this. How high of a frequency are we betting? So this is a high check frequency like we thought, right? And it is in fact going to mostly use the 33, 50, and 75. We don't have very much overbet. It is an option though. 1.1% is, I think, significant enough to not ignore. So we do have some overbet with like the nut hands and some 7x combos and 6x combos as a blocker. But most of the time we're going to be betting 75 or checking, I think, with a mix of these. So yeah, we have a mix of a few different sizings. Ace Jack suited particularly, I guess, really likes to check back, realize equity. Yeah, has a lot of good turns when we have the backdoor flush. Probably wants to see those turns. Same thing with Ace Queen and Ace King. A lot of checkbacks here. Just maybe has good showdown value too, right? Don't want to turn our stronger aces into a semi bluff. Rather, we would want to bet A7, A6 here at a higher frequency. Makes sense. So as an overall strategy, it looks like we're not using the overbet as much, but we still have these three options as well as check. I have a feeling I'm going to need to put in some work, hijack versus big blind. I don't think the hand matters anymore because bet wasn't really a thing on the flop. That being said, I'm going to continue to play here. Once we turn the queen of hearts, like I think we got to be mixing in a lot of bet. I did roll very passive, so I don't mind check back here at some frequency. But I think if I was going to bet, it would be like bet 75 or bet 125. Dang, I did choose check and that was wrong. We are going to be more aggressive with betting 75. And then on river, I don't think I want to bluff. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't exist, this spot. And so, yeah, 8 hands, 60%, not a good start for hijack, but that is a good sign for me to have to study this spot. So looking at hijack versus big blind, I would put something like 60% and then see how much the practice priority, oops, that's what happens when you try and draw. See how much the practice priority increased there when we put this down below the average of all the others. So in the future, that's something I want to practice until I get better at. And that's something that you guys can work on too if you have that leak, or if you have a leak, it's a different node. All right, that's going to do it for this session of the Study Chronicles. Next time, we're going to look at the big blind's perspective versus the hijack. I definitely needed a brush up on this one. I made a bunch of mistakes. I had some assumptions that were wrong, and this is why I study daily. This is why I continue to try and get better, because I'm always going to find something to improve on. And this spot importance drill, I think, is been proven to be very effective for me. I haven't had to put that much work into finding where my leaks were. They just automatically, not automatically, but they showed up very early on in my study. So hopefully that's going to help me improve. And throughout the series, I'm going to keep marking these spots and I'm going to keep trying to find these big leaks. And then maybe I'll make another video where I just play those spots over and over again where I have my biggest leaks and try and fix them. I think that could be some cool content as well. All right, guys, if you really enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It would help out the channel a lot. Or check out my Twitch. I'm live almost every day, Monday through Friday, around 9 or 10 a.m. Pacific time to do all of these study sessions. I'll catch you guys on the next one.